Hi, I'm Rachel DeWoskin. I'm a writer in Chicago. This is my current workspace. It is the windowsill in my bedroom. And behind me is the Field Museum, which is closed, and Soldier Field, which is empty, and Lakeshore Drive, which is quiet because people are staying home and keeping each other safe. And I'm thinking about indie bookstores and how much I love them. Women and Children First, and the Bookseller, and 57th Street, and Seminary Co-op, and the human beings, Jeff and Susie and Linda and Sarah, who shelve the books in those bookstores and who connect readers to the books that will matter most for them, for us, who care so much about writers and the work that we do. Apparently, Mao, my little chairman and cat, wants to be in this video as well. So I'm just going to talk for a minute about what I'm reading. I hope you'll order all of these books from the indie bookstores. They are miraculously, as you may have heard, still getting books to people's houses by sheer force of will. And the books, as they do, are still keeping us lively in our minds and keeping us hopeful, I think, in this really weird and difficult moment. So a little bit about what I'm reading. I'm teaching James Baldwin this week. I'm reading Go Tell It on the Mountain, which is one of my all-time favorite novels, especially to teach my students. And I'm rereading Citizen, which is Claudia Rankine's book. She's coming to University of Chicago, I guess not next year, but maybe the following year. So I'm very excited about that. I'm reading Anna Burns's novels, Milkman and also No Bones. I'm reading Reginald Dwayne Betts's new poems, Felon, which are amazing. I am rereading my all-time favorite book, Autobiography of Red by Anne Carson, the poet. I'm always rereading this book and I'm always teaching it, and I find new things in it each time I read it. I'm reading Rowan Ricardo Phillips' dynamic poems in Living Weapon, his new collection. I'm obviously reading a lot of things. It's very chaotic, actually. Not how I normally prefer to read, but my focus is fragmented. So reading old things and new things simultaneously is somehow helping me. It maybe is connecting the old things to the new things and making it possible for me to engage with books I don't know by way of books I know incredibly well. I'm reading Hong Kong's book, The White Book. I really admired The Vegetarian, and it's interesting to read something by her that is so different and also so good. I'm rereading Jesmyn Ward, Salvage the Bones, and I'm reading Chris Ware's new graphic novel, Rusty Brown, which is delicious and so complicated, and it requires a kind of luxurious reading that only his work excites in me. It's a very particular kind of care and attention with which I read his pages, and I'm so appreciative of the chance to read that way. I'm going out of the frame for a second to pull in just a couple more things. I just reread Edwidge Danticat's book, Everything Inside. She's one of my favorite writers. I find her politically radical, deeply, profoundly empathetic, and just often really brilliant. I'm reading my colleague Rachel Cohen's advanced reading copy of her forthcoming book, The Austen Years, which is a memoir about reading and living and losing your parents and having children, and about Jane Austen. And it's a beautiful, beautiful book. I'm rereading Xiaolu Guo's book, A Concise Dictionary for Lovers, a concise Chinese-English dictionary for lovers, which I've read 100 times and love to teach, about language acquisition and culture shock. Of course, for me, reading offers a primary experience of newness, which is like traveling, which of course we can't do right now, and which I'm thinking about a lot, not just in my own life, but migration and people who are moving across the globe with both courage and difficulty. I just read with my 12-year-old Betty Before X, which is a beautiful account of Betty before Malcolm X. And I am going to read two poems. One of my own poems from my first poetry collection, which actually just came out, called Two Menus, and then a poem by my mentor, the great American poet Robert Pinsky, who is one of the most brilliant and generous poets I've ever read, and who has shaped my imagination, and whose poem, Samurai Song, which is the poem I'm going to read, has gotten me and countless other people through many difficult moments, and is helping get me through this moment. And it's actually helping get my mom's high school students through this moment as well. My mom in Ann Arbor, Michigan, is having her high school students illustrate Samurai Song this week. So should you be inspired by it, you should also illustrate it. Love poem from South China. This is from Two Menus, my new book. The tropical infection traced a map up my finger, and standing outside the Kunming Red Cross Hospital, we watched this white rabbit eat Christmas poinsettia before we found the doctor named Wen. Registration for the operation cost 3 Kwai 5, equivalent to 27 cents. Dr. Wen pointed two fresh, ready fingers at his table and repeated, in English, operation. After the lecture on pus and abscess, you expressed nonchalance at the sight of his knife. He unwrapped it, you said, optimistic, and I whispered translations into the shirt where I buried my face at your waist. When Dr. Wen sliced the finger like tropical fruit, the leather taste spread to the back of my mouth. Operation Your Belt, Chinese vocab abscess, Operation White Rabbit, Red Plant. The day went on outside, and when I noticed it again hours later, I had stopped screaming. The bandages were just gauzy hotel curtains, angels in fluttering light. When I rolled from the shadows of hospital shock, you introduced me to my finger. Gored and masked criminal bandit, escaped from the Red Cross, you said, finger X. Read a passage from Our Man in Havana. Yes, China, Havana, nary a trauma. We double-wrapped the digits disguise with a plastic shower cap and swam off the coast of Hainan. But just to be safe, you carried me through the water with my hand raised like a torch above the waves. Of course, that poem is also about China, where I've spent most of my life, all of my 20s, a lot of my childhood with my parents who are very adventurous. My dad a sinologist and my mom a teacher and dancer and world traveler. I'm going to end with Samurai Song, which is one of my all-time favorite poems. It gives me courage. Samurai Song by Robert Pinsky. When I had no roof, I made audacity my roof. When I had no supper, my eyes dined. When I had no eyes, I listened. When I had no ears, I thought. When I had no thought, I waited. When I had no father, I made care my father. When I had no mother, I embraced order. When I had no friend, I made quiet my friend. When I had no enemy, I opposed my body. When I had no temple, I made my voice my temple. I have no priest, my tongue is my choir. When I have no means, fortune is my means. When I have nothing, death will be my fortune. Need is my tactic, detachment is my strategy. When I had no lover, I courted my sleep. Thank you, Robert Pinsky, for that astonishingly beautiful poem. And thank you guys for supporting our indie bookstores and Chicago writers and for hanging out with me here on my windowsill tonight and talking about books. I appreciate it. I have climbed down from the windowsill and come into the living room where we have an elegant old brailer, a braille machine, from the years I was studying Braille at the Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind. I was researching then a novel about a teenager who loses her eyesight in an accident and has to recalibrate how she's going to make meaning of the world, which of course for me includes reading. That book was Blind. This is our bookshelves, and a lot of my husband, who's a playwright and a screenwriter, and my books are at our offices, but some of our own books are here, our novels and poetry books and plays, and this is a graphic novel, Holler If You Hear Me, in which our 15-year-old has an adapted chapter. Greg Mitchie, who wrote the original Holler If You Hear Me 20 years ago, hired this year 10 teenagers, each to adapt a chapter of his book. The result is a youthful, exuberant, political masterpiece of a graphic novel. Over here is a swing. And this swing is where I've been writing during the many, many weeks we've been in the apartment now. And partly I like to write in the swing because it makes me feel free in a way I'm actually not. And partly I like it because it's ephemeral in some way. I don't usually work at home. I'm only writing sonnets these days. I think that's because the constraints are so stable and knowable, and because they exist without my having to invent them. I'm pointing the camera north because I want to give a shout out to Ed at Unabridged Books on the north side. I miss Unabridged and I miss all of our booksellers, and I'm grateful to be in this conversation with them, though it's virtual.